Well, thank you for spending some of your Saturday with us here at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. Sometimes one of the best ways for us to make sure that discoveries reach the public in a way that has an impact on you and me is by partnering with companies to take the idea forward to the clinic and eventually to the point where it's a therapy or product. So that's part of my job here at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. It is a fabulous job to have. I love it. But it's also a very, very difficult job because it takes a long time to take an idea from discovery to the public in the form of a therapy or a cure or a product, sometimes 15 to 30 years. There has to be continued interest and enthusiasm and funding to do that. It's expensive to do it, and it's complicated. The good news is Cold Spring Harbor, as a not-for-profit laboratory, isn't focused on getting a quick financial return. We're very interested in being in it for the long haul, and we're very dedicated to making sure that our discoveries have an impact. So I know this is a sophisticated audience, but because we only have a few minutes, I'm going to try and break down the process into 3 chunks or 3 phases. The first of which is basic research. Next, translational research, and third, clinical research. So the first of these is basic research. You can't start in the middle. You have to start here with basic research. None of the rest of it is possible unless we start here. A lot of our work here at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory is in the basic and fundamental research area. You just heard Steve talk about what he's doing in that regard. We heard from Eric and Chris. We're going to hear from Mikola. And this is a phase of research where the scientist is looking at what's going on inside us at a molecular level and says, what is going on here? And what does it mean? In the course of doing that, they may develop important basic research tools. You heard from Chris and Eric about RNAi. That was developed here, also short hairpin RNAs. These are tools that are used to manipulate genes so that we can understand disease better. That not only advances research here, but this type of basic research discovery advances basic research all over the world. The basic research discoveries also are the basis of teaching that goes on here, and we publish our scientists' research results are very well received in the most prestigious scientific journals. Again, these discoveries help add to the base of knowledge and impact research all over the world. And so when we do have basic research that's going on and we identify a target, this point of intervention, like in the case of that Eric and Chris talked about, it is BRD4. Or in the case that Steve was talking about, MECP2. Once we have that target, there may be an opportunity to move towards the next phase of research, which is translational research. And this is research where we've identified a target, we're trying to make sure it's a well-characterized target, and we're trying to find something to shoot at that target. It might be a small molecule. In the case that Chris and Eric talked about, there was a small molecule that was developed at Dana-Farber that impacted BRD4. That small molecule is now in a phase 1 clinical trial for treating leukemia. So this is a nice example of how a translation process could work. We're very fortunate on how that happened because of the collaborative nature of our scientists, where the timeline was compressed a little bit. So that's a great example of translational research. Some other examples are a partnership we've started with GSK Pharmaceutical Company based on the fundamental and basic research going on in the lab of Nicholas Tonks here at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. He studies insulin signaling based on phosphatases in our systems. And that attracted GSK to work with us to identify which of the drug candidates they were working with, which of the small molecules in their big library of molecules might be a good drug for diabetes or obesity. So we have a multi-year, multi-million-dollar collaboration going on with them, which we hope will result in identification and development of a new drug for diabetes and obesity. Another area where Cold Spring Harbor is involved in translation is the area of working with clinical organizations. One of those is North Shore LIJ. We recently announced an alliance with them where over a 10 to 15-year period, we will be working with them to identify targets that are relevant to cancer and advance those towards the clinic with the help of our colleagues there. So the good news about translational research, it allows us to take a discovery from basic and fundamental research a little closer to being a product or therapy for each of us or our families or family member or loved one. The bad news is that most ideas at this translational phase fail. Very few make it through. And when they do make it through, they have the next phase to deal with, which is the clinical phase, which is the most expensive phase and the most involved. It involves developing a trial protocol, coming up with a study that's arranged in such a way that we can tell whether or not this new therapy is going to be effective and safe. It involves finding volunteers to participate in that trial, so we need to step forward and volunteer to be studied in the context of this new therapy to see whether or not it's safe and efficacious. And data has to be gathered, analyzed all the time. A regulatory package is put together to make sure that we can convince the Food and Drug Administration that this approach is not only safe, but effective. And even once you're in this clinical phase, only 1 in 12 ideas make it all the way through to being demonstrated as being safe and effective as a therapy for us. An example where Cold Spring Harbor is involved in clinical research, in addition to what Chris and Eric talked about with Dana-Farber and the Weill Cornell clinical trial that's going on in leukemia, is a project that we have going with ISIS Pharmaceuticals and Biogen IDEC, a drug for spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, was first identified here based on the basic research of Adrian Krainer. It was identified in 2008. That therapy is now in the phase 3 clinical trial, and we're very hopeful that it will be one of the 1 in 12 that makes it all the way through to address this devastating disease in children. So what does this all cost? We talked about the timeline of 15 to 30 years. Annually, $100 billion is invested in research from the basic stage through translational research through to clinical research. This is a lot of money, no matter who you are. We're putting to work here at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory $100 million a year into the research that goes on here. And even though that may seem like a drop in the bucket, we're convinced that we're doing it in a way that's very smart. We're putting it in support of the best basic scientists, and we are working very hard to partner with excellent clinical partners and industry partners so that when we do have something that might best be translated towards being a product or a therapy, that we can do so crisply. So whether we are partnering through a clinical organization like Weill Cornell or Dana-Farber or Sloan Kettering or North Shore LIJ, or working with an existing company like GSK, Biogen IDEC, ISIS Pharmaceuticals, Pfizer, Boehringer Ingelheim. At any one time, we're working with about 20 companies on translational projects, or whether or not we're starting a new company. One of the other ways that we get involved in translation is that we are involved in creating new ventures to take ideas forward, and we have been part of 25 new companies over the history of the laboratory, and these are featured on a poster in the poster pavilion. I hope that you will take a look at. But whether we're partnering with a clinical organization or an existing company or one that we create, one of the things is always constant, and that is that we are absolutely dedicated to making sure that our research discoveries have an impact. Whether that impact is by providing tools to other researchers around the world so that science can be advanced, or through teaching and publication to add to the foundation of knowledge, or translation and clinical development, we are absolutely dedicated to make sure that our discoveries have an impact on all of you. So welcome to Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. This is a wonderful place, and I'm happy to take your questions.